Hi everyone, it's Sandy, and today I'm filming my February wrap-up. I ended up reading 7 books this month. The first book that I read is Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. This book follows Eliza, who is the anonymous creator of a really popular webcomic, and then there's Wallace, who recently transfers to Eliza's school, and Eliza finds out that he's this really popular fanfiction writer of her comics, but Wallace doesn't know that Eliza is the creator of those comics. I really enjoyed this book. I love that it deals with mental health. Our main character Eliza does have anxiety. I also really love that this book includes online friendships. Eliza has 2 best friends who are online. I really loved reading their conversations throughout this book, and I really loved how supportive they are of Eliza. I went into the story knowing that so many people loved it, and so I did have high expectations for the story. I still really enjoyed the story, but I didn't love it as much as many other people did. I ended up rating this book a 4 out of 5 stars. This book has been compared to Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, and Fangirl is one of my all-time favorite contemporary books. I guess I went into this book thinking that I would relate to Eliza as much as I did with Kath, and I didn't, and I guess that was kind of a letdown. I know so many people related to Eliza's character, and I definitely did in some aspects, but overall the story didn't really stick with me as Fangirl did. And I know I shouldn't be comparing Eliza and Her Monsters with Fangirl, but especially since this book has been compared to Fangirl a lot, I just can't help it. I still think this is a beautiful story and definitely worth reading, and like I said earlier, I ended up rating this book a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I finished is Love, Hate, and Other Filters by Samira Ahmed, and this book follows an Indian American Muslim teen named Maya. Throughout this book, she struggles with her dreams of going to New York and attending film school, or live up to her parents' expectations of going to school close to home and being paired off with an older Muslim boy. One day there is a terrorist attack that occurs, and the suspected terrorist shares the same last name as Maya, and that results in Islamophobia that Maya and her parents face. I think this book is really important because it tackles issues such as Islamophobia and other different topics, such as what it's like being an Indian American Muslim teen and also having parents that aren't supportive of one's passion. One thing that Maya experiences that really stuck out to me is that after the terrorist attack occurs, she prays and she hopes that the terrorist isn't Muslim due to the backlash that she and her Muslim community will face. And that's something that hasn't ever crossed my mind before, and I really appreciate that Samira Ahmed brought that to my attention and made me aware of that. I adored Maya's character. I loved her sense of agency in pursuing her passions, especially despite not having her parents' approval. However, I didn't like the romance in this book very much. I really disliked how there was a potential love triangle for the first 30% of the book. I thought it was completely unnecessary, especially since one of the love interests didn't even have a huge part in this book at all. With the main love interest, I felt like there wasn't really any depth to his character and that the readers didn't really get to know him very well. I felt like the romance between him and Maya was very surface level. The romance played such a huge role in the story too, and I really wish there was more of a focus on Maya as an individual, her passion, her struggles, the Islamophobia that she faces, and how she perseveres. Overall, I still highly recommend this book. I think it's definitely worth reading, but I ended up rating it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I finished is King's Cage by Victoria Aveyard. This is the 3rd book in the Red Queen series. I actually listened to this book as an audiobook. I feel like I'm just so disconnected with the Red Queen world that I just didn't really enjoy the book overall that much. I still liked it, but I didn't love it, and I also didn't really hate it. So I fall right in the middle when it comes to how I feel towards this book. I feel like so many people hate Red Queen or like really dislike Red Queen. I really enjoyed Red Queen when I first read it, and I know that it's very similar to a lot of other dystopian books, but I still really enjoyed reading it. And I feel like because I've waited so long to read each of the following books in the series, I just slowly fell out of love with Red Queen, which is kind of sad, but it happens. I really don't have much to say about this book considering that it's the 3rd book in the series. I don't even know when the 4th book comes out, but when it does, I will eventually pick it up because I've already read the first 3 books and the 4th book is the last book in the series. I do really like Mara's character though. She's been through so much and gone through a lot of character development. I think that as a character, she's really great. I also really like the romance in this book. It really wasn't like a huge focus of the story, but whenever we got those romantic scenes, I was really liking it. I can't remember if Glass Sword was told in multiple point of views, but this book was, and I found that to be pretty interesting because one of the point of views is told in a side character's point of view, and that point of view was from a side character that I didn't really remember who that character was. Now I kind of have a clue, but I still don't completely understand. I just didn't really care about their point of view very much, and I don't think their point of view was very necessary in my opinion. I don't know. And this book was pretty long too. I felt like some things could have been sped up a little bit. So overall, I rated this book a 3 out of 5 stars. So the next two books that I finished, I want to mention at the same time because they are books that I read for my English class and I don't want to go very in-depth talking about these books. The first one is Quicksand by Nella Larsen. This story takes place in the 1920s and it follows our main character Helga Crane. She's born to a white mother and a black father, and she's continually moving from place to place, trying to find her niche and trying to fit in. I really like that this book touches on racial inequality and what it's like being a person of color in the 1920s. And then the next book that I read for my English class is Orlando by Virginia Woolf. This is actually my first Virginia Woolf novel. This book is kind of like a fantasy novel or like magical realism because it follows the same person over centuries, yet by the end of the story this person is only 36 years old. So I think it's interesting that the author does play with temporality in this book. All I'm going to say is that the main character experiences a transformation, and if you read the synopsis will reveal this transformation, and I don't know if I should say that, if it's a spoiler or not. Probably is, because this transformation doesn't happen until like chapter 3 or chapter 4, and that's like halfway through the book anyways. I really love how this novel explores themes of gender identity. This book can be a bit confusing and also pretty boring at times, but I really like the whimsicalness of it, and to my surprise this book did have some funny moments which I really enjoyed reading about. So these are the two books that I read in February for my English class. By the way, I'm not an English major. I just had to take a literature class to fulfill a core, but I am glad that I'm taking this class because the class focuses on the feminist avant-garde, and I really love all the discussions that come from all the books that we're reading. I think they've been really great and I've been learning a lot from them. The next book that I read is a book that I also listened to on audiobook, and that is Sharp Objects by Gillian and Flynn. This book has been on my TBR for a really long time and I'm glad that I finally got to it. This book follows Camille, who's a reporter. She returns to her hometown to investigate 2 murders that happened recently. I kind of have mixed feelings about this book. I like that it was really easy to listen to. It really didn't take much for me to become engaged with the story. I really like mystery stories that take place in a small town, and that's exactly what this story does. I did like the mystery aspect and I was surprised to see where the story went. I did have a prediction about one of the characters that did end up becoming true, but then there was another thing about another character that was revealed that I didn't expect. A major problem that I had with this book is that this book sexualizes 13-year-old girls. I feel like a lot of the details about these young girls could have been excluded, especially since it didn't really serve a huge purpose in the story anyways. The main character in this book does have a past with cutting herself, so I do want to give a trigger warning for self-harm. Every time I pick up a mystery book, I always have high expectations. Overall, I would rate this book a 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't great, but I also didn't hate it either. I just expected more from this book. And the last book that I finished in February is A Conjuring of Like by V.E. Schwab. This is the third and final book in the Shades of Magic trilogy, and the first book is called A Darker Shade of Magic. It basically revolves around parallel Londons, and it follows 2 main characters, Kel and Lila. Kel is an Atari, and that's kind of like a word for a rare type of magician in the world, and Lila is a thief who runs into Kel and steals an object from him, and then the story goes from there. I really enjoyed the first book in the series. I wasn't a huge fan of the second book, so I was kind of like hesitant to go into the third book, and after reading the third book I still think the first book in the series is the best. Since this is the third book in a series, I can't really go much in depth about my thoughts, but I did enjoy this book a lot more than I did with the second book. Something that I've noticed with the second and the third book, that it takes forever for the plot of the story to like pick up and to like actually get started. It's been a while since I've read the first book, but with the second and third book I've noticed that there's just so much build up at the very beginning of the story that I'm kind of bored reading the beginning of the story, and because of that I didn't enjoy those books as much. I think with the first book it's different though, because it's the first book in the series, so that build up is necessary and it was interesting to read that build up, whereas with the second and third book the build up was just very slow and boring at times. In terms of wrapping up the story, I thought it was a really great and satisfying conclusion. I really love reading about Kel and Lila's character, and I really like that we got to read more from some of the side characters like Alucard and, is it Rai or Ri? I don't know how to say that character's name. And then there's another point of view that the book is also told in, but I don't know if I should say that point of view because I feel like it's kind of a spoiler. But with that character, not a fan, didn't really enjoy reading his point of view. I just really wasn't interested in that character, and I would have preferred to focus more on Kel and Lila, or the other 2 side characters, anyone but that character. So I ended up rating this book a 4 out of 5 stars. So those are all the books that I read in February. If you've read any of the books that I mentioned, please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Bye!